So we're still on the balance sheet, and we're still on the asset side of the balance sheet, right? We'll get a little bit into the liabilities or the funding stuff, and there's really not that much interesting there. But one interesting area, and I always find it fascinating, is really dealing with if I've got excess cash as an entity, do I leave it in cash or do I maybe I don't have any other investments to make. Maybe I actually invested in other companies. So we're talking about just overall investments that I can make that aren't part of property, plant, and equipment. So we're going to chat about investments. And when we think about investments, there's two different classifications of investment, broad classifications of investments. Now, we're not going to be chatting about derivative instruments here. That's a little bit too much. But we're just going to see if we can keep it simple and at least focus on two types of investments. So there are equity investments I can make where I am an owner in another company. And there are debt investments. Where I am lending money to a company, right? And there's an expected return on each of these. This one, there's a contractual return. It's actually listed in the contract. This one, there is a hopeful return based on how well the company does. Is it improving its worth? And if it's improving its worth, then my investment should also be improving its worth. So there's a hope of a return versus a contractual return. This is known, and I can look at the contract and I can see exactly what I should be getting. Whether I get it or not is a different thing, but whether or not I should be getting it. So with each of these, they have different types of characteristics. So with an equity investment, what I'm going to see in that contract is what percent ownership I have, right? It may not be spelled out in the contract, but I can at least see of the number of shares that are issued, I own X shares over the number of shares outstanding. And that tells me what my percentage ownership is, right? Where X is the number of shares that I purchased. I may have the rights to dividends. If paid, right? I might have the right to vote. If I own enough shares, I may also have the right to a board seat. Right? So again, this is just a sampling of the rights that may be existing in there, right? There may be as simple as I get dividends and I get to vote and I have this ownership percentage, and that may be it. I might have a board seat, or there may be other rights. But we'd have to look to whatever it is this contract is and see what are the different rights that are possessed with this. And this ownership percentage, as that changes, as that gets higher, the accounting for some of these equity investments also changes. Now, with a debt instrument, there's going to be contractual rights, right? These are rights, but they're contingent. They're contingent upon the other owners also agreeing that these things should happen. With a debt instrument, these are contractual. This is a contractual obligations. So there's likely a maturity date. When am I going to get my money back? There's likely interest payments and dates. Right? So there would be likely some stated interest rate. On the maturity date, there's likely some stated face amount. Of the instrument. Right? There may be default provisions. There might be provisions for early termination. There could be conversion features. Converting it to an equity instrument. Right? So each of these is for an organization and even for an individual. When I've got a little extra cash, maybe I put it into one of these two things. Now, which one has higher risk versus lower risk? Well, it's if I'm looking between these two things and I'm just looking for guaranteed returns versus contingent returns, I might want a debt instrument. If I don't care about contractual returns and I'm really interested in growing ownership and making my portfolio worth more in the future, because theoretically this is, being an equity owner, there's more of a chance of being of making more money versus being a lender, then I might want more equity. And as you start aging individually, right now as a 20, 30 something, you should have most of your stuff in the equity markets. As you start getting old like me, you start moving it from the equity markets into the debt markets, fixed income instruments, right? Where we know we have contractual obligations, contractual returns that I'm going to get based on these payment dates, what the stated rate is, the maturity date, et cetera, et cetera. So the blend of investments that you make sometimes depends on how much risk you want to take and how long you want that money to be in play, right? How long you want that money to be invested. For a company, they may say, listen, I've got a big investment coming up to buy maybe some new equipment or plant, and we need to make sure we pull our money out in the next 2 years. Then I probably wouldn't make equity investments. I'd probably make some debt investments that are high quality, not really risky, and I'm going to get a little bit of a return here from the interest, and that'll be fine. That way I know I'm not going to end up having this debt instrument decline significantly in value. It may decline in value, but it may not decline significantly in value. So all of these things, whether it's an equity investment or a debt investment, these things have certain accounting around them. There's specific accounting that you have to follow, whether it's an equity investment or a debt investment.